Welcome to EdShift, everyone. So for those of you who've been here before and those of you who are new, we are so happy to see you. EdShift is a monthly webinar where the SMART team really dives into research and best practice and explores what those could look like through the lens of lesson delivery in your classroom. Today is a little bit of a different EdShift, and I have to say, I don't know about you, Katie, but I have been looking forward to this moment all day long. So today we are joined by 3 student panelists, and we'll introduce them in just a second, and they are going to talk to us about this coming school year. What are their concerns? What are their hopes? What do they want you to know about them? And what do they hope that instruction could look like? So I cannot wait for this conversation. Now, as always with EdShift, in the follow-up, you get the presentation. Same thing will happen today. There'll be some bonus content in the presentation because we did some great pre-assessment with our students and they had some great insights, and you'll get those in the presentation as well. Now, we have a lesson, and I would love for our students to critique the lesson, but the things they have to share with you today are worth sitting around and listening to. So in the event that we do not get to the lesson, which I'm predicting is possible, don't worry. Our wonderful panelists have agreed to critique it anyway, and I will be recording a pre and post lesson. So once it's had its makeover, and you guys will get that too. So all of that will come in your follow-up email, the lesson, me delivering the lesson, and the presentation today. So it's going to feel a little bit different. It's going to be super fun and exciting. And I'm going to turn it over to Katie to introduce our guests.
Awesome. Thanks, Kris. And hi, everyone. Love seeing all of the introductions in the chat. Really cool that we have people from the United States, from Trinidad and Tobago, from Sarajevo, and probably a whole bunch of other locations.
Serbia, this is so cool, so global.
Love it. Love it. So one of our strategic partners at SMART is an organization some of you will be familiar with called Digital Promise. And earlier this year, Digital Promise partnered with a number of districts around the United States to put together an event that they called the C Summit. So that stands for Students for Equity in Education. And many amazing student leaders from across the country came together with groups and presented things that they wanted to talk about, things that really mattered to them in education. It was an incredible event. There are recordings available of that. But we were so enthralled and moved by this event, we knew that we wanted to have some of the voices of these student leaders as part of our EdShift series. So we're really pleased to be joined by 3 of these student leaders today, and I'll allow them to introduce themselves to you. So I'll go in alphabetical order, which means I'll start, Josh, with you. I'll let you introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Josh Elkin. I'm a senior in high school. I use he, him pronouns, and I live in Southeast Wisconsin.
Awesome. Thanks, Josh. Mame?
Hi, everyone. My name is Monet Forson. I'm a freshman at Harvard University, and I'm in New York.
Awesome. Thanks, Mame. And Rihanna?
My name is Rihanna Tillis. I'm a junior at Middletown High School and currently a virtual student.
Awesome. Thank you all so much. Super thrilled to have each of you here with us today.
So let's get started. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. So before we all joined you guys on the webinar here today, I had our team do a little bit of a pre-assessment to get some ideas. And as you guys know, I always start with a quote. And so I really wanted to pull a quote that kind of made me think of what our students have shared with us today and what they're going to talk about. And amazingly, I was on my run this morning listening to Danny Bauer's Better Leader, Better Schools podcast, and he was interviewing Michelle Mattoon, and they were talking about bringing a sense of belonging into the classroom and how important it is to feel connected to where you are so that you can be successful. And she said this thing that really stuck with me, and it's that we need to create a container of safety and trust before someone can bring their imperfect work to the table. And I love this. I love the spirit of, wrapping us up and making us feel like we can be individual, we can show our greatness, we can belong, and that we accept that, you know what? None of us is perfect. And we bring ourselves as authentic individuals and our work as iterations. And the students today, you know, some of the things they shared with me is like opportunities to practice and needing to understand things and wanting this whole range of safety that we're going to unpack in a minute to happen in the classroom. And I felt like this just kind of set the stage for that. And Katie, I'll let you add anything you want.
Yeah, I think this quote is so perfect, and so many of the themes that came up that all of the students participated in, you know, with our pre-work, you know, was the idea of wanting to be understood as individuals. In order to do that, there needs to be, you know, a layer of trust. And I think many of us can relate to that in our schools, on our campuses, in our workplaces. You know, we need that trust and safety all the way through our lives in order to be successful. So yeah, I love this and excited to dig into what some of these words mean a little bit more.
Right. And exactly. And if you guys didn't listen carefully enough, these great students did pre-work before they came to do a webinar that we invited them to on a school day. So what an awesome bunch. But let's get started and let's talk about some of the things that kind of came through in this. And so I asked all of our student panels today, you know, what's in your mind as you head back to school? And the issues that they shared, I think, are concerns for all of us. You know, mental health is a big one. Mental health has been an issue prior to the pandemic and has only really become more of something that we need to take into consider and focus on. You know, thinking about predictability. What will school look like? What should school look like? How is that evolving? How is that changing? And, you know, current events. The pandemic is not the only thing that, you know, has happened to us. And how do we stay connected to those? And how do we feel safe? And how do we talk about those things in school? And that brings me to this topic of safety. I think all of us, you know, universally are talking about safety, and we're talking about safety in different ways. And so, Josh, I wanted to start with you because your responses explored not only physical safety, but safety in terms of mental health, safety in terms of the protection of individual choices. So talk to us a little bit more about what's on your mind as you're starting back at school this year.
Sure. So my school, since the last school year, has lifted a lot of its COVID mitigation precautions, and it's creating a feeling of a lot of unease among myself and other students who are still unsure of what the best way to prevent this pandemic is. And I know there's a lot of feelings of unsafety when it comes to going into school? Do we feel comfortable being in an environment with students and teachers who might not be vaccinated? And that safety also transcends into how students who have marginalized identities feel in the classroom and how they feel in different environments with different students. So for instance, I'm Jewish and I'm queer, and there are different classroom environments where I'm not sure if this is necessarily a safe space. Over the last year, our school has done a better job of making LGBTQ plus inclusivity more visible, but it's important to ensure that all students, regardless of their backgrounds, feel comfortable and safe coming into different environments and being able to connect with students who come from backgrounds different from their own.
That's huge. And thank you for sharing those personal details with us too, Josh. I think understanding, you know, where our students are coming from is, you know, should be par for the course, but, you know, sometimes isn't, right? Rihanna, I'll ask you next. What does safety look and feel like to you in school, and what's top of mind for you?
Well, just like a calm, a safe space. I can't really do all the loud stuff. Like at our school, I know like safety is a big issue right now because I'm going to tell you, we've been having a lot of fights at our school. It's a lot of arguments. It's a lot of screaming and yelling. I just don't want to put myself in a situation where I'm going to be yelled at or even like have to do anything to anybody else because I feel like I'm being attacked. And even like with the communication is a total disconnect at our school with the students and the teachers. So to make it safe, we just have to reconnect. We have to figure out what really is the problem. It's not going to get better if nobody is going to fix it.
I mean, and that's such a courageous and powerful response, Rihanna. Like I feel the burden of what you're talking about there. And I love that you're pushing through that to find the solution and to find the connections. And I'm pretty inspired by that. And I hope our listeners are taking note of that as well. Mame, can you share a little bit about what safety means to you in school and what it feels like for you right now?
Yeah, right now, safety is both physical and mental. Like right now, I'm on campus. I'm currently in my dorm, and a couple of days ago, they had convocation where they had all 2,000 students just on like the steps taking like a class photo. And I understand that that's important, but at the same time, we're supposed to be following COVID guidelines. You can't have everybody next to each other like that. And what if people aren't vaccinated or something like that? So there are certain things that they need to do so that I feel safe, because I don't want to have to go back home after just moving to campus because there's now a like spread of COVID on the campus or something like that. So physically, I want to feel safe. Like I try not to do any social events anymore because I feel like I have to be isolated. I don't know if everybody on this campus like to be completely COVID aware. And a lot of people are wearing masks, but then like the mask is like halfway and your nose is out. Then there's no point of wearing masks. It's like things like that. And then mentally it's affecting me because now I can't be next to like my friends because all these huge gatherings, like even at the dining hall where they have like 1K students at once, it's very scary. So now it's affecting me like in class as well.
It's so interesting how something that, that would have just felt easy or so natural, like your point off the beginning of like, a class picture on the steps, like, yeah, we do this every year. Like, maybe we need to reevaluate those things that might have felt right a couple of years ago. And there's this desire for us to get back to normal, but that doesn't mean that we have to do things the same way that we were doing them before.
And what I'm hearing too is this, there is a mental burden that you guys as students are taking on because of choices that others are making. And I feel like that's hard. And I think that as, the teachers who are listening, as we think about that, like if you joined us last time, we talked a bit about the importance of like never dismissing things. And I think this is a reminder from 3 students here today that, we can't dismiss. We have to understand what's happening and we have to actively participate in shifting that needle. Like, just like Rihanna talked about, we have to connect and we have to move forward together. So let's talk a little bit about what you guys want from us as teachers. So what do you need from us? And my big takeaway from your comments, and we'll kind of unpack those here together, is that you need for your teachers to see you as individuals, to understand kind of your lived experiences and how that impacts your performance in the classroom. And the second thing that really came through to me, and as a former high school teacher, I wasn't necessarily expecting this, but I really was interested to see it, is that you need time to practice, you need time to explore, you need time to connect with each other without the pressure to be perfect, was something I feel like came through from your answers. So Rihanna, one of the things that came through in your responses is the need for teacher-student relationship. So what really amazed me is you're prepared to sacrifice things that you want for the well-being, particularly the mental well-being of your teacher. And at the same time, you shared some things that you need and you want to be understood and to perform at your best in the classroom. So I was hoping you could maybe tell us a little bit about what your ideal student-teacher relationship looks like.
Well, it's of course, respectful, and I want somebody that's almost like a friend, Even though some teachers be like, I'm not your friend, I'm your teacher. I know you want to be professional, but sometimes you're the only person a student has that believes in them or whatever else. So I just think I should be able to, I don't want to be scared to tell you what's happening at home, because I think you're going to think something's wrong with me or something wrong with a family member. I just want to be able to talk to you like if you believe in God, I want to be able to talk to you like I talk to God, just let my stress go, say whatever I need to, because as a teacher, you're supposed to protect me, kind of, especially at school. So I feel like I should be okay to just tell you what's on my mind. So that's it.
I think it comes back to that trust piece that we talked a little bit about at the beginning, right? And creating an environment of teachers that is free from judgment, and hoping that that is something that's mutual, and between teachers, in the classroom and in the staff room, being able to develop that sense of trust. And sometimes, as a teacher, you might not feel that you have enough control over that, but you certainly do in your classroom and in your relationships, right? I think that's such good insight, Rihanna. Josh, one of the things that really came through for me in the answers that you provided, you said something around the idea that, you care about the outside world a ton. You care about what's going on, in the world around you. And sometimes that can feel pretty overwhelming. And you mentioned that can even sometimes impact your focus at school. So I'd love to hear a little bit more from you about that sort of that intersection of, the outside world and the school world, and what can a teacher do in their classroom to support you in a way that helps you navigate everything that's going on.
Definitely. So I'll give an example right off the bat. January 6th, 2021, there's a huge insurrection occurring at the Capitol, and I'm in the middle of my AP Environmental Science class, and we're learning about the lesson as we do. And I'm virtual, I'm texting with one of my friends, and we're basically exchanging texts, confused over what's happening in our nation's capital, and unable to focus on what we're learning in class because there's a huge event going on in our outside world. Our democracy seems like it's about to falter, and we don't know what's going to happen. And I was expecting the next day for teachers to be able to talk about it with their students, to be able to hold space for them, and to give them a little bit of time to process that. And we weren't given that. We were basically told to just move on with the rest of the day. And it was never even brought up in class. I only had a private conversation about it with one of my advisors, and they were told not to hold space to talk about it. And that felt very inappropriate because here is one of the most significant events of the past 10 years happening. And there isn't any space being held for students who might be feeling overwhelmed, who are feeling stressed and uncertain about what the future holds. And it's important for teachers and schools to be able to not only hold that time, but be able to communicate with students outside of class. Hey, are you feeling okay? Are there any ways where I can alleviate that type of stress? I'll give another example. The week of elections, I could barely do any homework because I was constantly checking and refreshing the news to see what the election results were. And it really hurt my productivity. And it's important for teachers to be able to understand that the outside world impacts students' mental health and be able to accommodate lesson plans, accommodate how an everyday class is run, and be able to focus more on the material that will really help them learn instead of providing additional homework that can stress and overwhelm a student.
So can we dive just a little bit deeper into that, Josh? Because this is an area that fascinates me, because I think, as teachers, sometimes we want to talk, and sometimes we also are processing this. I know, when both of those things were happening, I was not super productive at work those days either. So when you're in the classroom and when these events are unfolding, would you be comfortable sharing a bit of what you'd like it to look like, or the types of conversations you'd like for your teachers to facilitate for you in the classroom?
I think it would be effective to start class, especially the first class of the day, with a brief debriefing, allowing students to be able to get off their chests. How are they feeling? Are you doing okay? Provide a space for students to be able to speak with other students and connect and empathize with one another, because obviously these feelings aren't isolated and a lot of people are feeling them. And in order to cultivate a community within a school, it's important to have students that may not necessarily know each other well be able to connect with each other on common feelings that they're experiencing. And even having those small moments within a classroom setting, taking, let's say, 5-10 minutes out of a lesson plan, can truly help create an environment where students feel seen and heard and feel that their needs truly are being recognized by their teachers.
Josh, or any of our other students, what would you say to a teacher who's listening to this or thinking about how to facilitate these conversations, who's just going, yeah, but that's just going to cause arguments. Then there's going to be division in my classroom about people that disagree. That makes me scared, and maybe I don't want to go down that path. It feels like it could be a negative way to start the day. what kind of advice or what might you say to someone who's thinking that?
Well, I would say, like, when you know me emotionally, you'll understand me more mentally. So, like, get to know me as a person, and then I'll get to know you even more. So then we can both feel comfortable with just telling each other what's on our mind, and you won't offend me in any way when you know me. So that's how I feel.
I think it's essential to, at the beginning of school years, be able to set a precedent in classrooms, be able to encourage critical thinking skills, because I think part of critical thinking is being able to recognize that you don't always know everything. Your perspective is the only perspective out there, and that a key part of growing is being able to empathize with other perspectives. And if we truly start by teaching empathy, then it makes it easier to have those or to have conversations about those hot topics, which might inspire debate, but at the same time, it can be fostered in a healthy manner as long as students respect one another for their varying viewpoints.
And so I'm going to use this moment to segue to ask Mame a question, because one of the things that Mame shared with us is that in the classroom, she doesn't love to be called on. You know, when she feels comfortable, then she's prepared to answer. And so, Mame, I was really curious from you is, what is that environment? How does a teacher create a place that you feel safe to contribute? And what does that look like to you?
So as someone with anxiety, being in a class where they're like calling, where they just call you out of nowhere, it just seems like they're putting you on the spot. Or like in earlier grades when they used to do like the popsicle sticks and they pull out your name and then you just have to talk in front of the class, even you didn't have time to sit there and think about your answer. But in high school and college, like in the later years, I started to see like teachers just want anybody to talk. So just give me time to sit there and think about my answer. And once I'm ready, I'll say it. But if you just call me out of nowhere, now I'm scrambling to talk and I'm feeling the pressure of everybody looking at me to answer. And my so it doesn't make as much sense as it could have if I had time. So if I'm not talking all the time and you need me to participate, then you can like maybe do like little group sections so it's not the entire class looking at you, or something where all the attention isn't on you. I prefer the small groups, because if it's like maybe a group of 10 here, there's something like that, then I can just talk in that small group and I won't feel like everybody's staring at me.
And so in some of the scenarios we've been talking about with current events where there's some polarizing topics that, you know, that need to be facilitated in the classroom, do you feel like that's a space where you would really benefit from these smaller group discussions?
Yeah, I would, because I mean, the point of these topics is just to see what see everyone's opinion. Like a class is meant to foster this environment where everyone can say their opinion. So as long as you set a few ground rules, like don't talk, or something like that, even if it's a controversial topic, everyone has opinions, to just let them say it. And if it does cause some back, that's okay. They're all learning. They're hearing somebody else's viewpoint. So as long as they're not like screaming over each other and causing like talking about something emotional, it's okay, because they're still learning.
I think that, and that idea around kind of facilitating those smaller group conversations and setting ground rules ahead of time actually speaks to one of the pieces that we have in the chat as well, in terms of, you know, teachers being concerned about ensuring that everyone is able to share their voice, and that everyone is able to do that without, you know, it taking up the whole period. So they're still able to get to some of those other things that are meant to be, you know, traditionally taught in their lesson, while still ensuring that students have the space to have those conversations and really have a voice. I think that tied in really well.
So before we jump into the next topic, the exercise was to understand what you guys as students want from us as teachers. What have I forgotten to ask you, or what else do you want to share before we move on and talk about how you want to learn? All right, Katie, I'm going to take the silence as we're ready to move forward. I feel like I'm learning so much here, so I'm really enjoying this conversation. So let's talk about actual learnings. You guys filled up this page for me. It was so exciting. And when you shared, what you wanted to learn, there was a lot of themes that kind of bubbled up. But, you guys wanted the opportunity to engage with the learning. You wanted to be challenged. You wanted to explore. You wanted to explore with your peers and have these peer conversations. You wanted things to be flexible. You wanted things to connect to, across the disciplines and across your communities. You're really looking for not just one thing delivered to you. You wanted to be able to make meaning and connection with the things that you were learning. And again, you wanted lots of opportunities to practice so that you could learn it for real. You could get it right without the pressure of grades. And so, Mommy, I'm going to start with you this time because you made a couple comments that really resonated with me about grades and the impact of grades on the work that you're doing. So tell me a little bit about how grades affect your learning and how we might do things differently to help you learn in a easier and or less stressful way.
Sorry, you called me right. My internet connection is stable.
The danger of online interactions. Did you hear the question or do you want me to repeat it for you?
Yeah, can you repeat it? I only have the first half.
No worries. So I just want to kind of explore this whole idea of grades. So like, how do grades impact your learning? What could teachers be doing differently to help reinforce your learning and make the experience better for you that maybe aren't connected to grades?
Yeah, so as a student, my grade is like a bit of the way that I learned in class. There was anxiety surrounding tests in terms of final and stuff like that because it was harder for me to sit there and actually absorb information because I thought that everything connected to the test. So I kind of just learned to the test. I didn't actually understand the content. So after the test was over, everything just left my head because I was just memorizing it for that test. So maybe put so much emphasis on grades. Like a final doesn't have to be 40% of your grade. If you can find a way to break it up into different things, like put it more toward participation or more towards I don't figure out the sections, but I have to put so much emphasis on that because that scares some students into actually they don't understand the content as much because they're scared of certain topics. So with me, I'm very bad at technology, but I always want to learn computer science, but I'm scared that if I take a class, I'm going to get a D because I have no idea what I'm doing. So I want to learn the content, but I'm scared about the consequences. So I'm going to take that class in college, fail. I'm still learning it. It doesn't impact my GPA, and I still get taking that knowledge.
If I can add a little bit, adding on to what Mame said, I think that the idea of being so focused on grades and how we perform in a class is often killing the intrinsic motivation of a lot of students. I know when I started off playing French horn in 5th grade, I was super motivated. I wanted to learn how to play the instrument and I was excited. But as soon as grades started becoming a more important part of our academics in 6th and 7th grade, I saw my motivation to practice and to continue playing my instrument rapidly deteriorate because I didn't enjoy playing French horn for the sake of it. I was playing it because I wanted to make sure that I could have an A on my transcript. And I think it's important for teachers. Obviously, there are larger academic institutions that make these steps towards progress difficult, but being able to create a classroom that isn't as focused on grades that allows students to be able to prove themselves in other ways, not just based strictly on tests. So as Mame said, potentially on participation, how students are able to explore their passions through the class and being able to truly encourage them to or go down those alternate pathways that don't necessarily align strictly with a unit that follows a test, being able to allow a space where students are able to explore their intrinsic love for learning instead of trying to narrow it down and make them feel as if they have to learn something rather than enjoying learning for the sake of it.
Yeah, I think those are so key. And I think, many of us can relate to that. Your example, Josh, is the French horn. And I think many of us have a metaphorical French horn of our own, that we've experienced over the years. I'd be interested when you think about the ways that are available to you to show your learning. I'd love to know if there's one kind of key from each of you, like if I could just do a podcast, if I could just make a poster to share my learning, is there one thing you'd like, I'd really love to be able to just share my learning in this way? What might that be? You can think about it and put it in the chat later too.
Yeah, right. It's a tough question. Like I'll share as you guys are kind of brainstorming. So my daughter is 13 and she would love to make a video of everything. If she could stop motion everything out there, like that would be her preferred response to everything. You ask her to actually type words in a sentence and she makes sounds like she's dying for sure. And so it's always interesting for me to explore like, what is it that I really need you as a student to know? And what are the different ways that you can show me? And I try, not in the lesson I have today, but I try in a lot of the lessons that I've done to really like give you choices. Do you want to show me verbally? Do you want to show me visually? Do you prefer traditional? Because again, like there's so many different ways to express it. So maybe that gave you guys some thinking time. And any of you who want to share how you think that you could show your skills alongside your learning, I'd love to hear it.
I think dialogue and being able to show your learning through different conversations would be really effective. I think sometimes I don't effectively communicate what I'm thinking, but a lot of my ideas and a lot of my passion shines through how I'm speaking, because when I'm speaking, I'm able to emphasize and really hone in on the details that matter to me. The tone of my voice, the speed at which I speak really emphasizes what's important to me, what matters. And I think that if I'm thrown in thrown in an environment where I'm speaking with other students about a topic that we're very passionate about, that that type of passion shines through. And if you get me to talk about something that really matters to me, I could be ranting on for hours and hours on end.
I like that. And I wonder if in the classroom, Josh, that could translate into, maybe you do a podcast that's an interview about a topic, or you do a podcast that's a panel discussion about a topic, to really kind of allow that conversation to develop and to show your passion, and then to show some of the skills there too. Rihanna, Mommy, any thoughts on if you didn't have to write that paper, what would you do instead? Other ways to show what you know.
Same, exactly what Josh said, basically. Just like for history class, there's a lot of open air discussion and we could talk back and forth about agreements, disagreements. It's like speech and debate club almost. So I really like that a lot. And what I'm talking about, you'll definitely be able to tell. So I like talking better.
I really like how this is a way to capture passion. We've heard that from both Rihanna and Josh. So let's kind of think about what that day could look like. So like, Rihanna, if you're thinking about what's happening in your classroom. So we know that, you're passionate, you like to talk, you like that interaction. What would kind of entering the classroom to leaving the classroom potentially look like in an environment that really allows you to engage with your learning and to learn in a way that helps you?
Well, I mostly where it happens is always history. That's like the favorite class to do it in. So he kind of has our tables spread apart, almost like this side. It's kind of like a judge type of classroom, like a court classroom, I guess. And we all just talk about the different things. If you believe in this, you're on this side. If you disagree, you're on that side. And then we just all go back and forth. It's peaceful. Even on like topics that are super sensitive, we can talk about and we can go back and forth and everybody get their piece in. I think it's cool that we're able to do that, especially on super sensitive topics where like some people would be offended, but once the classroom is comfortable with each other and then like stuff that everyone wants to talk about and knows and like that's relatable, whether you're white, black, indigenous, whatever. And everybody has, a story to tell. So especially in history. So when we can go back and forth, it's really good.
Do you feel like in that situation, so I love, you know, kind of this container of safety where you guys can all come in and you can talk whatever, you know, wherever your point of departure is, you can share your beliefs. Do you feel like that helps you see some of these, you know, more difficult or polarizing topics through other people's experiences, and that it helps you build connections?
Yes, most definitely. Because even with the teacher, I'm not going to tell you my experience until you tell me yours so I can feel comfortable, just so I can see if we can relate. Like, even like what happens at home, like, you know, my my science teacher used to tell me like my dad was really strict, he was mean, you know, we got whoopings, stuff like that. I got whoopings too, but I wasn't gonna say that until he told me. So I wouldn't look like, are you okay? You know, like, so just anybody who's relatable, I would be able to tell them like it's a lot of people going through stuff, especially in history class. I feel like that's the most comfortable place to, you know, discuss different type of situations because everybody's going through something. So that's where it always happens for us.
Yeah, I appreciate that insight so much, Rihanna. And it had me thinking too about, you know, there's science behind that. You know, when we look at particularly around design thinking, there's studies coming out of places like IDEO that say, you know, when we know each other as human beings, we can actually be more creative and be more innovative. And that certainly applies, you know, classroom, boardroom, living room, everywhere. So yeah, thank you for that share.
Right, the neuroscience behind that. We could totally nerd on that, but we will not today. So Josh and Mame, so I think it's really interesting that Rihanna has shared, you know, she feels in this one type of class. So when she's in history, it really lends itself to this conversation that connects her to her teachers and her peers. I'd love to hear two things. A, what are the classes that you go to that help that happen? And are there subjects where it seems more difficult to build that connection?
Sure. So I can actually talk about, or if I can talk about my Seesaw presentation for a bit. Our group did a presentation called Looking Back on the Present, where we specifically targeted humanities educators and gave them insight on how to create curriculum that's more relevant to, or that does a better job of connecting history with modern day events and being able to present underrepresented narratives within their curriculum. And I would say that it's easiest to be able to talk about social issues and talk about current affairs in social studies classes, talking about it in English classes, because those are the topics that most easily lend themselves to what's happening in society. And I would say in natural sciences, it can be more difficult, but I also don't think it's impossible. One of my closest, or one of the teachers whom I was closest with was my environmental science teacher last year. And environmental science has the potential to be a very interdisciplinary area of subject and area of study. And one of the ways where she was hoping to improve was being able to bring in more social, cultural, political perspectives in order to make sure that she wasn't making or presenting environmental science as solely a natural science based subject. So she would talk to myself and one of my classmates about talking about different cultures, talking about different pioneers in environmental science areas throughout history, being able to talk about different figures coming from marginalized backgrounds, and discuss how some of them weren't given the same attention. So for instance, in biology, talking about how Rosalind Franklin was the person who discovered the double helix, not Watson and Crick, I believe, and talk about how sexism in the 1950s, hoping my facts are right there, played a role in her not being credited for that.
Yeah, I love that. So what I wonder about as a natural follow-on from, so I'm a former science teacher. I will tell you that now. And I do, like, I think it's important to build those connections to make things relevant. I'm wondering if any of you want to share your thoughts on math. Like, A, what do you think about math, and how could we start to foster some of this in the math classroom?
Well, I like math personally, but like that's a type of class where even if you don't understand, they're moving on to the next assignment. So you just have to be prepared for that. And then it's harder for it to be brought up in math class. Like why are you talking about that? This is math class. But I mean, it can be brought up, but I don't know exactly how you would approach it without someone being offended, unless depending on the group of people in your classroom. But like with math, that's probably not something I would even risk talking about, rather than in the other class where like culture is almost through the classes, like with art and then science, social studies, English, any other class, even cooking class. I would rather talk about that type of topic than math class.
So it's super interesting because there's two things that, just came out of that, right? Is like math feels like a place for math. And also math feels like a place where you might need more time and opportunity to practice. And so I'm hearing some flexibility and opportunity to engage with the content. And maybe to go back to what, Mame was saying about grades, is how do we do that in a way that helps you connect with the content and practice it more, and then maybe make your own connections to the world outside, but not necessarily talk about them in the classroom. Josh, Mame, either of you want to top up on that?
Yeah, I can. What I want to say is like a mixture of both, of what Rayana and Josh said. So math and science, like they're usually the classes where you can't really talk about anything besides math and science because it's so like cut and. But I've had classes in the past where the teachers managed to make them more relevant to modern events somehow. So like with math class, I had an Algebra 2 class a couple of years ago where before like lesson, he connected his history. We're learning about like geometry, trigonometry. He'd talk about the ancient Egyptians and how they used math to build the pyramids. Or if we were talking about, I don't remember what the topic was, but he brought in Greece, he brought in like the Middle East and how they like work with zero and like things like that. So you can still connect culture to math. And same with science. It doesn't have to be just, this is the brain, how it works. Like you can connect it to other things like social economics and race and things like that. So like we were learning about how autism develops in the younger kids and how race plays a role in how it's diagnosed, especially with Black kids, how things happen like with the Tuskegee syphilis experiment and things like that. Like why Black people are not as trusting of medicine, and like you can always connect history to science. So it's not always cut and dry in natural sciences. It doesn't have to be. You can always find a way to connect it, and it makes your students more willing to learn because they realize that it's connected to modern events. So it doesn't always have to be like teach exactly what's on the unit. Find a way to make it relevant.
Definitely. As for science, I remember learning about viruses as a freshman, and unfortunately COVID came in my sophomore year, so that would have made for a more practical application. But there are definitely ways to apply different scientific topics to different social or different points in history, different current issues, etc. As for math, this might be a stretch, but this is also I'm also a senior in high school, so there are things that I know and don't know. But I remember in 8th grade, our English teacher came to us and she was talking about credibility. And one of the things that she was laughing off was this article that was basically calling math racist. And she was like, how could numbers be racist? There's just no way. So I decided to look into the article a little bit more. And what ended up talking about was how the types of math, or how the type of math and the types of concepts that it roots it, or that it derives from, were largely the ones that were pioneered by individuals in ancient Greece and ancient Rome, not necessarily as many mathematicians from the Middle East or from other places in the world that had notable mathematical discoveries, but because of the way that we've structured our math curriculum, it primarily comes from Western mathematicians. So am I necessarily suggesting that we abandon math curriculum altogether and come up with this new one that is more inclusive of different mathematicians to our history? I'm not exactly sure, but I think it's worth noting that math is such a wide and such a universal topic, and many different civilizations have explored it. So being able to create a math curriculum that connects to all those different cultures that have made the field of math truly what it is today.
So insightful.
Right. I love that. So, Katie, I'm looking at the time, and I am I'm torn. Should we dive into this topic a little bit more, or should we hop over to the lesson? What are you feeling?
I think it almost feels like a bit of a natural extension considering the topic you chose for today's lesson, Kris. To maybe jump into that, and would love to get, even if it's just a few minutes of feedback from our leaders here about their thoughts on a physics lesson.
Right. So I was primed by your responses, and I knew we had to dive into math or science. And I feel like physics does a pretty decent job of marrying the two together. So what we're going to do is, if anyone wants to join my class, and our student panel, you guys can either join and look at it, or we can walk through it together. It's totally up to you. If you go to hellosmart.com and you're going to join as a guest and pop in my class code, which is 979887, that will pull you right into the lesson, which will look the same as what is on the screen. So you can do a little bit of exploring. Also, all of you are welcome to come off of mute, because this is unfiltered feedback. I definitely want you to tell me like what's too much, what's not enough, what I should do differently, what I should do more of, what I should do less of. There is nothing off the table here. And you can even tell me my lesson is terrible, and I will not be upset or offended. All right. So I have got a bunch of you guys in here. Perfect. So let's jump into our intro to physical science. So what I wanted to do here, I taught a lot of physical science, doesn't always get people excited, is to make some connections to the real world first. And after we make the connections to the real world, this lesson actually dives into not one, but all three of Newton's laws, and kind of finding ways to connect with them and practice them and apply them. But first, I really want to know about you guys as my students. So this is something I do all the time. So I'm super excited for some student feedback on this. This is a mood meter. And what I'm going to do is pull all of you guys in here on the same team, and you will see the mood meter. So we've got quadrants here, right? So we've got the love it, hate it scale, and the know a little, know a lot scale. So what I want you to do is come over to this little icon that looks like a mountain and a moon or a sun, depending on your perspective, with a plus sign. You can find pictures in there. You can search for anything you want. So search for the picture that shows me what do you feel like when you are doing physics, and put it into the right spot on the quadrant. And as you guys are doing that, you can tell me, is this a dumb activity? Is this an interesting activity? You don't have to stay on mute. You can give some feedback, and we've got our audience. We've got some members in here as well. So it's going to get a little busy in this space in just a second. All right. Know a lot, but a very electrified cat. I like that one. Oh yeah, that face. Seen that one before. Yeah, very skeptical. Yeah, I've seen that one before too.
I relate to all of these. Other than the smiley face that just came in, not me actually.
So as this is filling out, I'll share a fun tidbit. My brother is actually a nuclear scientist, and he is the commander of a submarine, and always made me feel like my physics knowledge was woefully inadequate. And yet I know a decent amount about physics, but I still never feel like I know a lot. I would still put myself squarely in know a little, because he just runs circles around my physics knowledge. So Rana, Josh, Mommy, what do you think about starting off like this? Just being able to express what you know and what you feel.
I think it's a good activity, more so for the beginning of the year, to gauge where students are feeling about physics, especially if this is their first physics class, or not their first physics class. If this is a higher level physics class, they're basing their knowledge off of how they felt in previous classes and how are they feeling about the subject, so teachers can get a feel for every student.
Rihanna, you're going to share something too. What do you think?
Yeah, I think if your audience is a high school student, it's going to be a little bit hard for everyone to participate in that. But I don't think it's bad. But you would probably have to make sure you put a sticker on which one you feel like for the high school students.
Okay, that is good feedback as well. Mommy, anything to share before we head to the next page?
My Wi-Fi cut out again, but I heard what you said. For this one, you could probably do instead of people looking up pictures, they just are those emojis, those things. So those would be easier and more uniform, so you don't have a bunch of random pictures everywhere and it's hard to decipher what everyone's saying.
I like that. So what I'm hearing is I just line up my emojis for you to grab copies of, and then you could do them from there. I'm going to try that one. Okay. So Katie, are you taking notes for me so I can make all these changes?
I am.
Awesome. All right. I love it. Okay. So the next thing I would do then is a little bit of direct teaching. So context for physics. I try not to do too much direct teaching all at once because I feel like you guys, my students, get super bored and stop listening to me. So basically, like, this is just here. This is why we're doing physics. We might have a discussion about this. You guys tell me, do we need to talk about why physics is important, or do I just tell you that physics is important?
I think that you should talk about it, especially for first timers that don't really know anything about physics.
Right? That freshman physical science class you guys all took. Okay. Josh, what do you think?
Yeah.
Definitely provide practical applications of how can this subject apply to something else. Like Mame was explaining how in a biology class they could talk about the Tuskegee syphilis trials, try to come up with a way to tie it into something in the real world.
Okay, so it's like you guys read my mind a little bit. So the next thing I would do there is do a little poll of everyday physics and do some brainstorming and have you guys just think of examples of physics in your everyday life. But I have a question about this. Like, depending on where I am with physics, when I was making this, I'm like, oh, that feels like it could be a step too far if you're not connecting to physics. But then I also like this kind of brainstorming where we just get a bunch of ideas up there. So you guys tell me what you think.
I think this is great, especially if the slide before, once you explain to them what physics is, I feel like it will be easy.
I like it.
I like it.
Lots of examples because I use physics as an excuse for many things. All right, look, and we're getting some really great answers here. I love it. Okay, so this page, Katie gets to stay. The next thing then that I want to do is do a little bit of peer learning because I feel like, and we've talked about this, right? Like we all look at things through different lenses and we can all learn things from each other. And so this is an activity I would set up, and you guys don't have to give me answers on this. I'll just kind of show you what it looked like, where I would put you in teams of as close to 4 as I can get. And then I'd start that. And so what I have here is just a jigsaw activity. So I've got you in teams, and in your teams, what I'd have you do is I picked some key physics that I just want to make connections to, like using our cell phone. That definitely requires some physics. Flying in an airplane, driving a car, listening to music. So I'm trying to capture some different aspects of physics here. And what I'd have you do is just do a little bit of research, like nothing. You're not really being graded on facts here, but I want you to just spend a time exploring, making some connections, going down those rabbit holes that are interesting to you, and then coming back and teaching your group. And so this would kind of for the first intro to this, we've probably now gotten to the end of our 55-minute lesson. So what do you think? Open-ended exploration, making some connections, following your own passions, realistic, not realistic?
I'm assuming that this lesson was about Newton's through laws of motion.
Yes, but not all of this connects to Newton. So very good. You were paying attention in your physics class. So the idea here, is like particularly as a standalone lesson, and I feel like my teachers in the audience may separate this out into 2. This is, connect you to overall physics is all around us, and then we're going to dial it down into Newton's laws.
This might just be me, but I would struggle if we were given a broad question like research the physics, because physics itself is a very broad subject. I think if we were given a very specific concept like research how Newton's through laws of motion specifically apply to this outside idea, that would give people a bit more direction, and then they're going to be able to connect it to something they're passionate about.
I like that. I have a follow-up question. Would you like to do that after we've done some direct teaching, or do you want to do your own exploration, kind of start to form your own ideas, and then have your teacher and your peers help refine and clear up that idea for you? What's your ideal sequence there?
I like after the direct concept has been taught, because I think it gives students a little bit more clarity. They can understand the subject or the concept more. And the way that you're able to solidify the concept is when you're given that practical application.
Okay, and I see Rihanna nodding in agreement. Mame, it sounds like the consensus is kill this page. We're going to move on to Newton's laws. What do you think? All right. So from there, I would have done this as a follow-up. Obviously, we're killing this page too, because you guys didn't learn anything because we killed that activity. So now we get into the physics of motions. And so this is where Newton's law comes in. And what I'm hearing from the ways you guys would like me to edit this lesson is to start with Newton's laws. So maybe do the mood meter around not physics in general, but your understanding of Newton's laws to kind of activate some prior knowledge and figure out where we stand with Newton. And then maybe quick brainstorm of Newton in real life with the brainstorming. And then we move into direct teaching. And mostly I'm saying this so later I can listen to the recording and fix the lesson for you guys. Okay. So physics of motion. I really like what I want to do is I feel like as a teacher, there's a difference between me saying Newton's laws and physics of motion. I'm trying to give you the thing to connect to instead of something a little bit more abstract, like some guy's name. So yeah. All right. I see nods there. Okay, perfect. So what I've done, I find, and you guys tell me if I have made a grievous error here, that it is easier to understand these laws, not as individual laws, but to like start looking at the big picture and then gradually unpack them. And so that's what I've tried to do here. So I've given you guys, so direct teaching, we talk about this, first law, object stays at rest. Second law, force equals mass times acceleration. And then the third law, where forces always exist in pairs that are equal and opposite to each other. Okay, so I feel like when I've taught this before, I get a lot of like glazed eyes. I have no idea what you're talking about. Have you lost your mind, to say? And so what I wanted to do on the second page is give you something concrete to tie to that. So for my first law, I've got the example of an astronaut lets go of a tool in space, doesn't move, but if he throws it, it doesn't stop. So kind of looking at that, like an object is going to keep doing what an object is doing. Second law, if you kick a brick, it's going to take a lot more effort than kicking a soccer ball, right? Because mass is that factor that determines that there. And then for the third law, if you're sitting in your teacher's rolling chair in the front of the room and you throw a basketball across the room, your rolling chair is going backwards, right? So starting to identify the forces. So show me nods. Is that helpful to kind of extend the laws there? Okay. And then who is feeling overwhelmed that I'm doing all three laws at once? You can give me, okay, Katie. Katie's like, no more physics. All right, Rihanna, Josh, Mame, are you okay with all three, or would you have preferred me to sequence them law 1, law 2, law 3?
I think it's good at the same time. I think somebody in the chat, I want to say their name is Taya, said adding pictures would be really good. And that would definitely help, especially for visual learners.
Okay, I like it. All right, so we will add some pictures to this. Maybe we'll even have a page that looks at some pictures. I like that. I actually have a picture idea for that one too. All right, we're going to do this last piece and then we're going to be sadly out of time, but I feel like we've got some good feedback for editing. So I love Think, Pair, Share. My students, what do you guys think about Think, Pair, Share? I do it all the time, but I need to know if you hate it. So in this one, like the Think, Pair, Share here, I'd have you guys write each law in your own words. I'd have you talk to someone else and tell them your interpretations of the law. I'd have you listen to their interpretations and record what you hear. And then I'd have you talk about any like misalignments between your definitions that help you identify misconceptions and then edit as needed. And so as a teacher, I would see you guys doing this and I would like pop in with some questions to redirect if I felt like you were confused or if you needed help or if you needed additional resources. But I really want you guys to talk about it, to figure it out in your language and to kind of teach someone else to start to solidify that understanding. Okay, Josh is giving me the tentative go ahead. I've got a not enthusiastic head nod, but a head nod. Rihanna, what do you think?
I think it's all right, but it might be a little bit much. What grade are you teaching?
So I'm really thinking like this is stuff that we do in 9th grade. So like
Okay.
we do it some in middle school as well. So I'm some adaptation from teachers to kind of span this from our middle school to our early high school.
I think this would be all right, but I feel like a lot more people would come back to you and be like, can you help me? And like a little bit more struggling with this one.
Okay. How could I, so if I'm a teacher who wants to help you kind of develop some of these problem solving skills and to trust yourself to like try a definition and we'll iterate until you get it right. How could I set this up for you to send you down the path of kind of self-discovery and iteration to like get to the misconception on your own, right? It's kind of this concept of make the mistakes so you know what to fix. How could I help you in this activity? That's a big question with lots of pressure. Sorry.
Well, I would have to like you said, listen to the interpretation of the laws first to really see, and then I would tell you what I'm thinking, and then you'll be like, think harder or whatever, and then I'll go back and change it and fix it and do stuff like that. But that's the only thing I can think of.
Okay. Would you feel comfortable getting that feedback from a peer? Or is that something that you're looking for, your relationship with your teacher to help you?
Well, I could go to another student, ask them, but I hope that they really know it too, because if they don't know either, then when we both come back to you, it's like, oh, that's not right. And then I'm going to be like, oh my gosh.
I hear you. I'm hearing processing time, and I'm hearing possibly providing a little bit more information before we get to this stage, like maybe embedding some videos with some direct teaching. Okay, I am loving this feedback, but we are past time.
I was about to add one more thing before you.
Yeah, please, jump in.
Yeah, for the breakout rooms, when we usually do like a pair thing, if the teacher doesn't give enough like information beforehand and they send us to the breakout rooms, we kind of just sit there and stare at each other because neither one knows what's going on yet. And then time runs out, we go back to the full room, and then the teacher asks us to share, and the whole class is silent. So you need to give like a little bit more information beforehand so we know what we're talking about breakout room.
Okay, I have a question related to that. Sorry. I often put audio instructions in my things that will go in breakout rooms, which is just me like rambling the same way I would ramble in front of you, but that I wouldn't necessarily type. Would you listen to those? Rihanna says yes. Mommy?
Yes, I said I definitely would. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. All right. This has been amazing. This actually, like you guys dissecting the lesson, has been the most fun I've had today. So I'm super appreciative of your time. Everyone in the audience, I'm going to make some changes to this lesson. I'm going to shoot it past these lovely students again to make sure I hit the mark on what they were saying. And then we will send that out to you in the follow-up. The other quick note, Katie, that I think we should definitely talk about is, I'm going to speed to the end of the presentation. Guess what's coming? Katie, you want to tell everybody?
Sure. We are so excited to be building another part of this wonderful EdShift series in the form of a podcast. So we will send everyone who attended today, or if you've attended EdShift in the past, we will send you an email with details as soon as our first couple of episodes drop. You'll be able to listen to it wherever you listen to podcasts. So really excited to share that with all of you, and excited to have incredible voices like the ones we've had on today as part of our podcast as well.
Exactly. And so with that, huge thank you, Rihanna, Josh, Mame. I am so appreciative of your time and your insights today, and that you're willing to take time out of your days to be here with Katie and I. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone, and have a great rest of your day.